When Sebastian Miller found 3 missing charity envelopes inside his wife's bank, he could have confronted her immediately. Instead, the veteran-turned-pizza shop owner started documenting everything every late night, every suspicious meeting, every diverted dollar meant for veterans. His wife Allison thought she was playing the perfect game with her lover and their financial schemes. She didn't know her husband was building an airtight case using only paper trails and instant photos. By the time she served him divorce papers in front of 200 people, it was already too late. The evidence was complete, the FBI was involved, and the infrastructure of betrayal was about to collapse. Chapter 1. The cassette answering machine clicked to life in the back office of Elm Street Pizza, its red light blinking like a warning Sebastian Miller couldn't yet understand. The beige plastic box sat on his cluttered desk between stacks of invoices and a cold cup of coffee, looking about as outdated as he felt most days. Outside, Pine Hollow's main drag was settling into another quiet Tuesday evening, the kind where you could hear the traffic lights clicking through their cycles. Sebastian pushed through the swinging door from the kitchen, flour still dusting his forearms. At 42, he moved with the controlled economy of someone who'd learned not to waste motion, a habit from another life, one he didn't talk about much. The Sharpie in his shirt pocket had left a small ink stain near the edge, barely noticeable unless you were the type to notice everything. "Boss, we're down to the last bag of mozzarella," Carlos called from the kitchen. The older man had been with him since Sebastian bought the place 3 years back, right after his last deployment. Carlos didn't ask questions about the past, and Sebastian didn't pry into why a former executive chef was slinging pizzas in a small Connecticut town. Some partnerships worked better with silence. "I'll grab more from the walk-in," Sebastian replied, but the blinking light caught his eye. He hit play. The voice that came through was male, professional, slightly rushed. "Yeah, it's me. The portfolio box will be ready after 6. Same place as last time. Don't use the main entrance, click. Wrong number, obviously." The caller had hung up mid-sentence, probably realizing his mistake. But something about it made Sebastian's neck prickle, that old sensation from Fallujah when things were too quiet on patrol. He rewound the tape, listened again. "Portfolio box. After 6. Don't use the main entrance. Most people would have deleted it, moved on." Sebastian pulled out the Sharpie and wrote on the cassette label, "Tuesday, March 15th, 7:47 p.m. wrong number." Then he ejected the tape and slipped it into his jacket pocket. Old habits. Scout, his golden retriever, lifted her head from her bed in the corner. The dog had a way of reading his moods that bordered on supernatural. She'd been with him through the divorce talks that started last year, through Allison's increasing distance, through the nights when he'd paced the kitchen trying to figure out where his marriage had gone sideways. "Just a wrong number, girl," he told Scout, but she kept watching him with those amber eyes that seemed to say she wasn't buying it. The next morning brought one of those March days that couldn't decide between winter and spring. Sebastian stood in the Clearview Bank and Trust lobby, holding a manila envelope that had been misdelivered to the pizzeria. The morning sun slanted through the tall windows, highlighting dust motes that danced above the green marble floor. The whole place smelled like furniture polish, and that particular scent banks have money and anxiety mixed together. "Can I help you?" The teller was young, maybe 25, with a name tag reading Jennifer and the kind of forced smile they must teach in training. "This came to my shop by mistake." Sebastian slid the envelope across the polished counter. It was addressed to R. Anderson, internal. "Figured I'd drop it off on my way to the supplier." Jennifer's smile flickered. "Oh, I'll make sure Mr. Anderson gets it." She pulled out a rubber date stamp, the kind with rotating numbers that clicked when you turned them. The ink pad was blue, not the standard black. She stamped the envelope with more force than necessary. 11:23 a.m. Sebastian had already memorized her initials from the nameplate JK and noted the wall clock behind her head showing 11:24, 1 minute fast. These were the details that mattered, though he couldn't say why yet. His pocket notebook came out smooth as breathing, and he jotted it all down while pretending to check his phone. "Is Allison in today?" he asked, keeping his voice casual. His wife had been putting in long hours lately. Senior loan officer meant pressure, she said. numbers to hit. "Mrs. Miller's in a meeting," Jennifer replied, her eyes sliding toward the elevator bank. "Should be done soon if you want to wait." "No need. Just tell her I stopped by." But as he turned to leave, Sebastian caught a glimpse through the glass conference room door. Allison sat next to a man in a charcoal suit, Rhett Anderson, according to the nameplate he'd seen on a door upstairs last month. Regional Portfolio Manager. They weren't looking at any papers. They were looking at each other, and the space between them was charged with something that made Sebastian's stomach tighten. He pushed through the bank's heavy doors into the March air, which suddenly felt colder. The cafe across from the bank was Violet Taylor's domain. The 28-year-old barista ran the place like a ship's captain, knowing every regular's order and most of their business. Sebastian ordered 2 drip coffees, 1 black for him, 1 with cream for Carlos, and paid cash while Violet worked the ancient espresso machine that wheezed like an asthmatic. "You know what I noticed?" Violet said, not looking up from the pitcher she was steaming. "Your wife and that portfolio guy, they take the same smoke break every day. 3:15, like clockwork." Sebastian kept his face neutral. "Allison doesn't smoke. That's what I mean." Violet's spiral notebook lay open on the counter, filled with her chicken scratch handwriting. She was working on what she called her Great American Novel, but seemed to spend more time observing real life than creating fiction. "Neither does he. They just stand out there by the loading dock, talking." She rang him up and he pocketed the receipt. $4.50 for 2 coffees. Highway robbery, but the information was worth more. He'd staple that receipt into a folder later, though he wasn't sure why he was starting to collect things. Evidence of what? That night, the Miller kitchen felt too large. The house on Sycamore Street had been Allison's choice, a colonial with good bones and better resale value, she'd said. Sebastian stood at the granite island, a manila folder spread before him. He'd written oddities on the tab in his blocky handwriting. Inside, the cassette tape, the receipt from the cafe, a flyer showing Clearview's hours with a red circle around after-hours deposit box available. His notes from the bank, recording times and stamps and initials. Looking at it all together, it was nothing. Random pieces that didn't connect. Yet. Scout padded in from the living room, her tags jingling softly. Sebastian had trained her using a mix of voice commands and whistles, something he'd picked up from a K-9 handler in Afghanistan. She could clear a room, check perimeters, and alert to trouble, all without barking unless necessary. "Want to practice?" he asked, and her tail immediately started wagging. They went through the routine hand signals for stay, come guard. A specific whistle pattern that meant check the yard. She performed perfectly, as always, then returned for her reward a scratch behind the ears and a piece of leftover pepperoni. The garage door rumbled open at 9:47 p.m., late again. Allison's heels clicked on the concrete, then went silent as she hit the carpeted stairs. She used to call when she'd be late, used to kiss him hello, even after the long days. Now she moved through their house like a ghost, avoiding the living. "How was your day?" he called out, but got only a muffled fine from upstairs. The master bedroom door clicked shut. Sebastian looked down at his folder, then at Scout. "Something's coming, girl. Can you feel it?" The dog tilted her head, then walked to the back door and whined softly. When he let her out, she immediately oriented toward the back corner of the yard, ears forward, alert. Nothing there but shadows and the neighbor's fence. But Scout held the position for 30 seconds before relaxing. Sebastian made a note in his book. 10:15 p.m. Scout alerted to SW corner. Nothing visible. Later, much later, when the house was dark and Allison's breathing had settled into sleep, Sebastian stood at their bedroom window. Down the street, under the streetlight at the corner of Sycamore and Elm, a car idled. He couldn't make out the model, but it looked dark blue or black. After 3 minutes, it pulled away without turning on its headlights until it reached the stop sign. He made another note. The next evening, Sebastian drove past the bank at 11:30 p.m. The parking lot should have been empty except for the security car that made rounds every 2 hours. Instead, he saw 2 vehicles in the far corner, tucked behind the dumpster enclosure where the security cameras had a blind spot, something he'd noticed months ago when picking Allison up during a snowstorm. One car was Allison's silver Lexus. The other was a black BMW he'd seen in the reserved spots during business hours. The cars were parked driver door to driver door, windows down despite the chill. He couldn't see faces in the darkness, but he didn't need to. Sebastian didn't slow down, didn't turn his head, obviously. Just drove past like anyone else heading home late. But his hands gripped the steering wheel hard enough to make his knuckles white. The betrayal sat in his chest like shrapnel, sharp and deep and working its way toward his heart. At home, he pulled out his notebook and wrote, 11:32 p.m. bank lot. As and probable RA. Cars positioned for conversation. 2 minutes observation. Both vehicles departed separately. A's at 11:34, other at 11:36, different exits. The words looked clinical on the page. Just facts. No mention of how his hands shook slightly as he wrote, or how Scout pressed against his leg, sensing his distress. No record of the marriage that was dying in a bank parking lot, one secret meeting at a time. Sebastian closed the notebook and looked at the folder marked Oddities. Tomorrow he'd make it more organized. Tomorrow he'd start being systematic about this. Because if 15 years of marriage could end in a dark parking lot, then he'd damn well document every detail of its destruction. The infrastructure of betrayal, he was learning, left a paper trail if you knew where to look. Chapter 2. The church hall at St. Andrew's still smelled like it did when Sebastian was a kid. Lemon pledge and old coffee with an undertone of vanilla candles from the gift shop. Thursday morning sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, painting colored shadows across the cork bulletin board where he stood with a stack of photocopied flyers and a box of thumbtacks. Veterans Aid Pizza Night Cash, only Friday, March 25th, the flyers announced in bold letters across the top. Below, in smaller print, support your local veterans. All proceeds benefit the Pine Hollow Veterans Assistance Fund. Numbered tickets available at the door. George Jackson shuffled over, his police captain's retirement belly preceding him by a good 6 inches. 25 years on the Pine Hollow force had left him with a permanent squint and an uncanny ability to smell bullshit from 3 blocks away. Since when do you run charity events, Sebastian? George's voice carried that particular tone cops used when they knew you were up to something but hadn't figured out what yet. Since Cody Martinez raised his catering prices and the vets can't afford the monthly dinner anymore. Sebastian pushed another thumbtack through a flyer. Figured I could help out. Cash only keeps it simple, no credit card fees eating into the donations. George studied him for a long moment. They'd known each other since Sebastian came back from his 3rd deployment, broken in ways that didn't show on x-rays. George had been the one to suggest buying the pizzeria, said it would give him purpose. Something to build instead of destroy. Cash only, George repeated slowly. Numbered tickets. You planning to run this like a military operation? Only way I know how. Sebastian pulled out his flip phone, a Nokia that Allison constantly mocked, and snapped a photo of the posted flyer. The date stamp burned into the tiny LCD screen. March 17th, 2016, 9:47 a.m. Mind if I leave a stack at the front desk? Suit yourself? George's eyes narrowed slightly. Everything okay at home? Why wouldn't it be? Because you're documenting a charity pizza night like it's evidence for a trial. Sebastian forced a laugh that sounded hollow even to him. Old habits. You know how it is. George knew, all right. The older man's expression softened slightly. If you need anything, I'll let you know. But they both knew he wouldn't. Sebastian had learned long ago that battles were won with intelligence, not reinforcements. And this battle, whatever it was becoming, was his alone to fight. That afternoon, he stood in the Elm Street Pizza kitchen training Carlos on the ticket system. The older cook listened with the patience of someone who'd seen enough to know when not to ask questions. Every envelope gets a number, Sebastian explained, showing him the pre-printed series from 001 to 200. Write the buyer's initials on the envelope and the matching stub. Stubs go in here. He held up an old cigar tin, its red and gold label faded but still readable. Monte Cristo Havana. Carlos had given it to him last Christmas, empty but still smelling faintly of tobacco. Why not just use a cash box like normal people? Carlos asked, but his tone was gentle. This way we can track everything. Make sure all the donations make it where they're supposed to go. Sebastian applied a fresh piece of masking tape to the tin and wrote the date with his Sharpie. Nobody questions a veteran helping veterans, right? Carlos gave him a long look, the kind that said he saw through the excuse but would play along anyway. Whatever you say, boss. You want me to count it after? Every bill, and note any envelope that doesn't come back. You expecting some won't? Sebastian thought about the bank's after-hours deposit box, about portfolio boxes and meetings that ran late, just being thorough. That evening, Sebastian found himself at Clearview Bank and Trust again, this time legitimately depositing the day's receipts from the pizzeria. The lobby was nearly empty at 6:45 p.m., just him and Emily Lopez pushing her cleaning cart past the teller windows. Emily was one of those people who became invisible in uniform gray polyester shirt, black pants, hair pulled back in a severe bun. But Sebastian had noticed her precision, the way she cleaned in exact patterns, never missing a spot. She wore a small cross necklace that caught the light when she bent to empty waste baskets. "Can't let you near the shredder console while I'm cleaning," she said when he wandered too close to the back area. Her accent carried traces of Guatemala, softened by 20 years in Connecticut. "Bank rules." "Sorry, didn't mean to get in your way." He stepped back, hands raised in mock surrender. "Just killing time while the deposit processes." She studied him for a moment, dark eyes unreadable. "You're the pizza shop owner. Your wife works here." "That's right. She works late a lot." The statement hung between them, loaded with implications Emily might not have intended. Or maybe she did. Sebastian couldn't tell. "The banking business never sleeps," he said carefully. Emily made a sound that might have been agreement or skepticism, then pushed her cart toward the elevator. But not before Sebastian noticed her name badge, Emily Lopez, night custodial, employee 447. Another detail filed away, though he wasn't sure why it mattered. Later that night, in his garage workshop, Sebastian loaded a fresh pack of Polaroid film into the camera he'd bought at a yard sale last month. The instant camera was a dinosaur, like his flip phone and the cassette answering machine. But dinosaurs had survived a long time before the meteor hit. Scout watched from her bed in the corner, occasionally lifting her head when he made too much noise. He'd run her through boundary drills earlier, reinforcing the perimeter alerts with treats and praise. She could distinguish between normal neighborhood sounds and actual threats now, only alerting when something was genuinely off. "Come here, girl," he called softly, and she patted over. He gave her a piece of beef jerky, her favorite, while scratching behind her ears. "You're going to earn your keep soon. I can feel it." The dog's tail wagged, but her eyes remained alert, watchful. She'd been trained by someone who knew what they were doing before Sebastian adopted her from the rescue. Military dog, they'd said, though the paperwork was vague. Washed out of the program for being too independent. Sebastian considered it a feature, not a bug. His phone buzzed. A text from Allison. "Working late again. Don't wait up." He didn't respond. Instead, he pulled out his notebook and wrote, "March 17th, 10:30 p.m. AL, working late. 4th time this week." The folder marked oddities had grown thicker. Now it contained the cassette tape, various receipts, photos of flyers, and several pages of notes in his cramped handwriting. Looking at it objectively, it was nothing. Circumstantial at best. But Sebastian had learned in Iraq that circumstantial evidence could paint a picture if you collected enough of it. The charity pizza night would be his first real test. Create a controlled environment with traceable markers, the numbered envelopes, and see where they ended up. If his suspicions were right, some of that cash would take a detour before reaching its destination, and he'd have proof. Friday arrived gray and damp, the kind of March day that made your bones ache. The St. Andrew's Church Hall filled up quickly, veterans and their families, local supporters, curious townspeople drawn by the promise of cheap pizza and a good cause. Sebastian worked the entrance while Carlos handled the kitchen they'd set up in the back. Each person who entered got their envelope and stub, with Sebastian carefully recording initials in his ledger. Most people barely noticed the system, just happy to support the cause. "Envelope 047 for RT," he said, handing the envelope to Robert Torres, a Vietnam vet who lived 3 streets over. Just drop it in the collection plate when the ushers come around. Paisley Hernandez from the Pine Hollow Ledger showed up around 7, camera in hand. She was young, maybe 30, with the hungry look of a reporter who hadn't given up on finding real stories in a small town. "Mind if I get some photos?" she asked. "Veterans supporting veterans, local business giving back, it's a good story." "Sure," Sebastian said, but made sure she caught him recording envelope numbers in the ledger. If anyone asked later, there'd be photographic evidence of his system. By 8 o'clock, they'd sold 178 envelopes and served roughly 300 slices of pizza. The church hall hummed with conversation and laughter, the kind of community gathering that made small towns worth living in. Sebastian stood by the kitchen pass-through, watching Carlos tally the stubs. "We're missing 3, Carlos said quietly. "Envelopes 024, 089, and 143. Sebastian checked his ledger. 024 had gone to MP, probably Mary Patterson. 089 to JS, could be anyone. 143 to DW David Williams, maybe, or Donna Washington. "Note it," he told Carlos. "Put the ledger page in the tin with the stubs." After cleanup, Sebastian sat in his truck in the church parking lot, engine off, watching the bank across the street. It was 10:47 p.m., well past closing, but lights burned on the second floor. As he watched, a figure moved past a window too far to identify, but the silhouette looked female. He pulled out the Polaroid camera and snapped a photo of the building, making sure to capture the lit windows and the timestamp from the bank's own digital sign. 10:48 p.m., 38 degrees. The photo slid out with that distinctive whir-click sound, and he set it on the dashboard to develop. 3 minutes later, Allison's Lexus pulled out of the bank's rear exit. 30 seconds after that, a black BMW followed. They turned in opposite directions at the traffic light, but Sebastian had mapped the routes both cars would end up on Route 9 heading toward Westbrook within 2 miles. He wrote it all down in his notebook, then looked at the Polaroid. The image was grainy but clear enough. Clearview Bank and Trust, windows lit after hours. Evidence of something, even if he wasn't sure what yet. Saturday morning came early and cold. Sebastian stood in the church back room with George Jackson, both of them looking at the ledger he'd posted on the bulletin board. He'd made a carbon copy before posting it, keeping the original in his files. 3 envelopes unaccounted for, George said, his cop instincts clearly engaged. Could be innocent. People forget, or decide not to donate after all. Could be, Sebastian agreed. That's why I'm posting this publicly. If anyone sees their initials and knows they donated, they can speak up. George gave him that look again, the one that said he knew there was more to the story. "You want to tell me what this is really about?" "It's about accountability," Sebastian said, which was true enough. "Making sure money goes where it's supposed to go. And if those 3 envelopes show up somewhere they shouldn't," Sebastian met his eyes steadily, "then we'll know something's wrong with the system, won't we?" Before George could respond, his phone rang. He answered, listened, then handed it to Sebastian. "It's Emily Lopez. Says she needs to talk to you about something she saw at the bank." Sebastian took the phone, his pulse quickening. "This is Sebastian." "Mr. Miller?" Emily's voice was cautious, uncertain. "I maybe see something yesterday, during the charity event, but I don't want trouble." "No trouble," he assured her. "What did you see?" "Envelopes. 3 of them. In the bank's night deposit preparation. But they had numbers on them like the ones from your pizza night." Sebastian gripped the phone tighter. "You're sure? I clean the same route every night. I know what belongs and what doesn't. Those envelopes, they weren't supposed to be there." "Can you tell me the numbers?" There was a pause. 024, 089, and I think 143. I remember because I grew up at 143 Maple Street. The exact 3 missing envelopes. Sebastian closed his eyes briefly, feeling that cold satisfaction of confirmation mixing with the hot acid of betrayal. Someone had diverted charity funds through the bank's deposit system, and he had a witness. "Thank you, Emily. This is very helpful. I don't want to lose my job." "You won't, I promise. This stays between us for now." After he hung up, George was watching him with those cop eyes that missed nothing. Those 3 envelopes ended up at the bank? Appears so. Allison works at that bank. Yes. George was quiet for a long moment. Then, you need to be very careful how you handle this. Very careful. Sebastian nodded. He was already being careful. That's why he had carbon copies, photographs, witnessed ledgers, and now testimony from an uninvolved third party. He was building something methodical and undeniable, one piece of evidence at a time. That night, in the Blue Heron Diner on Route 9, Sebastian sat in his truck in the parking lot, engine off, watching through the window. Booth 17, the corner one with the torn vinyl seat they never seemed to fix. Allison sat on one side, Rhett Anderson on the other. They were angled toward each other, leaning in like conspirators or lovers or both. The waitress tagged as Brenda brought them coffee. One check, Sebastian noted. She laid it between them and neither reached for it, comfortable in their shared space. Rhett's hand rested on the table inches from Allison's. Not touching, but the intent was clear. Sebastian raised the Polaroid camera and took a photo through his windshield. The image would be terrible, dark, grainy, shot through glass, but it would show 2 figures in a booth, intimate in their positioning. Another piece of evidence, another entry in his notebook. He drove home slowly, Scout's head on his lap as he steered one-handed. The dog always knew when he was upset, always offered her quiet comfort. At home, he added the new Polaroid to his folder, now thick enough that he'd had to reinforce it with tape. March 18th, 2016, he wrote in his notebook. Patterns established, envelopes diverted, after-hours meetings confirmed. Next step, document the paper trail at the bank itself. The infrastructure of betrayal was becoming visible, one traced transaction at a time, and Sebastian was learning that revenge didn't require violence or confrontation. Sometimes the most devastating blow was simply showing people exactly what they'd done, reflected back at them in black and white, or in this case, in numbered envelopes and Polaroid snapshots, building toward something that couldn't be denied or explained away, the kind of evidence that would stand up in court if it came to that. And increasingly, Sebastian thought it would. Chapter 3. Monday morning hit Pine Hollow with unseasonable warmth, the kind of March day that tricked crocuses into blooming early. Sebastian stood in the St. Andrew's Hall setting up for another charity event, this one bigger, the Spring Veterans Benefit. Lightning didn't strike twice unless you set up the rod just right. The numbered envelopes were stacked in neat piles of 50. This time he'd added a subtle watermark using a UV pen he'd bought at the art supply store, invisible to the naked eye, but it would glow under blacklight. Each envelope also had a tiny pinhole pattern in the corner, different for each batch. Overkill, maybe, but Sebastian had learned in Fallujah that redundancy saved lives. Here, it might save his sanity. "You're really going all out," Father Martinez observed, carrying a box of paper plates. The priest was young, maybe 35, with the kind of earnest energy that made cynics uncomfortable. "The veterans appreciate this, you know." "It's the least I can do," Sebastian replied, but his mind was elsewhere. He'd timed this event for a Tuesday night, knowing Allison had her standing portfolio review meeting that ran late. He wanted her nowhere near this operation. Carlos arrived with the pizza warmers and started setting up the serving station. He gave Sebastian a look that said he knew something was up but wouldn't ask. That was Carlos, loyal to a fault and smart enough to maintain plausible deniability. "Same system as last time?" Carlos asked. "Exactly the same. Every envelope numbered, every buyer recorded, every stub saved. And if some go missing again? Then we'll have established a pattern." The event started at 6. By 6:30, the hall was packed. Sebastian worked the entrance, ledger in hand, recording every transaction with mechanical precision. MK got envelope 031. RJ got 067. Each interaction was witnessed by at least 3 people, their presence noted in his peripheral vision like mapping hostile territory. Violet Taylor showed up around 7, notebook in hand. She wasn't covering the event for any paper, just observing, she said, for her novel. "Writers are like spies," she told Sebastian, accepting envelope 101. "We watch people when they don't know they're being watched." "What have you observed lately?" he asked, keeping his tone casual. "That some people's smoke breaks are getting longer. and they've started leaving separately but ending up at the same place. She tilted her head, studying him. You know, like characters in a story who think they're being subtle. Sebastian recorded her initials VT next to envelope 101. Stories need evidence to be believable. Oh, I agree. That's why I write everything down. She tapped her notebook. Dates, times, places. You never know what detail will matter later. By 8 o'clock, they'd sold 195 envelopes. The collection plates had made their rounds, carried by ushers who followed the same route they used for Sunday service up the right aisle, across the back, down the left aisle. Sebastian watched from the kitchen pass-through as people dropped their envelopes with varying degrees of ceremony. Some made a show of it, others slipped them in quietly. After cleanup, Sebastian and Carlos counted in the back room. George Jackson sat in the corner, having appointed himself as an unofficial observer. 7 missing, Carlos announced. Envelopes 018, 044, 072, 099, 131, 164, and 189. Sebastian checked his ledger, matching numbers to initials. Different people than last time, no repeat patterns in the buyers. But 7 was too many to be coincidence. Could be people changed their minds, George said, but his tone suggested he didn't believe it. Could be, Sebastian agreed. He pulled out a piece of carbon paper and made a copy of the ledger page. I'm posting this publicly again. Let's see if anyone claims they donated those numbers. And if those envelopes show up somewhere else? Sebastian thought about the UV markings, the pinholes, the multiple witnesses. Then we'll know someone's running a different kind of collection. Tuesday morning arrived with fog thick enough to muffle sound. Sebastian stood in the bank foyer at 11:15 a.m., ostensibly filling out a deposit slip, but actually watching the behind-the-counter activity. The afternoon deposit pouches were being prepared, and through the gap in the teller window, he could see familiar numbered envelopes. Not just familiar, his envelopes. He recognized the batch pattern of pinholes on envelope 044, visible when it caught the light just right. Another charity envelope had made its way into the bank's regular deposit stream. He abandoned the deposit slip and walked to the courtesy phone on the wall, dialing the church office. Martha? It's Sebastian Miller. Can you check something for me? The collection from last night, has it been counted yet? Martha, the church secretary for longer than anyone could remember, rustled papers on her end. Father Martinez is counting it now with the finance committee. Why? Just wanted to make sure everything was accounted for. Thanks. He hung up and turned to find Emily Lopez mopping near the elevator. She glanced at him, then at the teller area, then back to him. A tiny nod, she'd seen them too. That afternoon, Sebastian sat in the courthouse records room, ostensibly researching property records for a potential second location. In reality, he was building a timeline. Hazel Garcia, the records clerk, barely looked up from her crossword puzzle as he worked. The bank's public filings were all there: board minutes, annual reports, regulatory submissions. He photographed pages with his flip phone, the tiny camera struggling with the fluorescent lighting. Board meeting minutes from January showed Rhett Anderson presenting a new portfolio management strategy that involved enhanced evening availability for client services. Evening availability. Sebastian thought about late-night cars in empty parking lots. Finding what you need? Hazel asked, not looking up from her puzzle. More than I expected, Sebastian admitted. Funny how that happens in records rooms. Sometimes you find things people forgot were public. That evening, Sebastian posted the carbon copy of the ledger on the church bulletin board, circling the 7 missing envelope numbers in red ink. He stood back, admiring his work, when Father Martinez approached. Sebastian, this seems aggressive. It's transparent, Sebastian corrected. If those envelopes were donated, people will say so. If not, we know the exact amount that went missing. And if someone just forgot? 7 people, all on the same night? The priest's expression was troubled. I don't want this to become a witch hunt. Neither do I. I just want accountability. But that was only partly true. Sebastian wanted more than accountability, he wanted proof. Undeniable, documented proof that would stand up to any scrutiny. The kind of proof that would matter in court. Wednesday brought rain and revelations. Emily called Sebastian from a payphone during her lunch break, her voice tight with nervousness. "I saw more," she said without preamble. "Last night, those 7 envelopes. They went into a separate pouch, not the regular deposit." "Separate how?" "Different color coding. Regular deposits are in green pouches. These went into a blue one. And—" She paused, lowering her voice. "Mr. Anderson signed for it specially. Rhett Anderson, the portfolio manager who had meetings about enhanced evening availability, who took smoke breaks with Allison when neither of them smoked." "Did you see where the blue pouch went?" "Into Mr. Anderson's office. He has a safe there, separate from the main vault." Sebastian gripped the phone tighter. "Emily, this is important. Would you be willing to write down what you've seen, date it, and sign it?" Silence. Then, "I need this job, Mr. Miller." "I understand. I'm not asking you to do anything that would risk that. Just, if you could document what you observe, privately, it might matter later." "I'll think about it." She hung up, leaving Sebastian standing in the rain outside the convenience store, processing this information. A separate pouch, a private safe, charity funds diverted into portfolio management. The pieces were connecting, forming a picture of systematic theft, but he needed more than suspicion and second-hand observation. That night, he sat in his garage with Scout, the folder of evidence spread across his workbench. The dog watched as he arranged and rearranged pieces, photos, receipts, ledger copies, notes, looking for the pattern that would make it all make sense. His phone buzzed. "Allison, portfolio review running late again, don't wait up." He texted back, "Okay." Then added to his notebook, "March 22nd, 8:47 p.m. portfolio review. 3rd this month." At 11:30 p.m., he drove past the bank. 2 cars in the lot, positioned in that same corner behind the dumpster enclosure. But this time there was a third vehicle, a van with secure document services on the side. As Sebastian watched from across the street, someone wheeled boxes from the bank's rear entrance to the van. He grabbed the Polaroid camera, but the distance and darkness made it pointless. Instead, he wrote down the van's license plate and company name. Another thread to pull. Thursday morning found him at the Pine Hollow Ledger's cramped office, talking to Paisley Hernandez. The reporter listened to his story, carefully edited to focus just on the missing charity funds while taking notes in shorthand. "You're saying someone's stealing from veterans?" she asked. "I'm saying envelopes designated for charity are ending up in bank deposits. Draw your own conclusions." "Do you have proof?" Sebastian pulled out copies of the ledgers, showing the missing numbers. "These envelopes were sold but never appeared in the collection. Multiple witnesses can confirm the sales." "But you can't prove they ended up at the bank." "Not yet," Sebastian thought. But he said, "I have witnesses who've seen similar envelopes in bank materials." Paisley studied him. "This is about more than charity fraud, isn't it?" "It's about accountability," Sebastian said, sticking to his script. "Public funds should be publicly tracked." "I'll look into it," she promised. "But I need more than missing envelopes to run a story." "You'll have it," Sebastian said. "Soon." That afternoon, back in the courthouse records room, Sebastian found what he'd been looking for, buried in the bank's board minutes from 6 months ago. R. Anderson proposes new cash management system for high-value clients. Motion carried. Details to be maintained in separate confidential portfolio. Separate, confidential, portfolio. Hazel looked up from her desk. "You know, sometimes people file things thinking they're private, but if they're referenced in public minutes, they become discoverable." Sebastian looked at her sharply. "Is that so?" "Hypothetically speaking, if someone was running a parallel system within a bank, and that system was referenced in public documents, well," she shrugged. "Public is public. How would someone discover these reference documents? They'd need cause, like, say, evidence of diverted funds. Then they could request an audit. And who conducts audits? State Banking Commission. They take financial irregularities very seriously." She pulled out a business card from her desk drawer. "Reagan Williams, senior auditor, very thorough." Sebastian took the card, understanding passing between them. Hazel had seen something, or knew something, or maybe just sensed something was off. Small towns were like that, everyone watching everyone, information flowing in underground streams. That evening, Sebastian set up for one final test. A small, impromptu pizza sale in the church parking lot, cash only, numbered envelopes, but this time with a twist. He'd dusted the inside of each envelope with UV powder, the kind used to mark bills in bank robbery cases. Invisible to the naked eye, but it would transfer to anything it touched and glow under blacklight for days. Only 20 envelopes this time, sold to specific people he'd selected, all regular churchgoers who'd definitely donate. He made sure Father Martinez blessed the envelopes publicly, adding a moral weight to them. By 8 p.m., all 20 envelopes had been sold and collected. Sebastian counted them with Carlos and George watching. All 20 accounted for. He bundled them in a sealed bag marked with the date, time, and all 3 of their signatures, then locked it in the church safe. "Now we wait," he told George. "For what?" "To see if any of these envelopes mysteriously appear elsewhere, and if they do." He pulled out a small UV flashlight from his pocket. "We'll be able to prove exactly where they came from." Friday night came clear and cold. Sebastian parked across from the bank at 11:45 p.m., engine off, watching. Like clockwork, Allison's Lexus appeared, followed 5 minutes later by Rhett's BMW. They parked in their usual spot, but this time they both got out. Sebastian watched through binoculars as they stood by the bank's rear entrance. Rhett held a small pouch blue, just as Emily had described. Allison had a manila folder. They appeared to be comparing documents. Rhett pointing at something, Allison nodding. Then she did something that made Sebastian's blood run cold. She reached up and touched Rhett's face, a gesture so intimate it could only mean one thing. Rhett caught her hand, held it for a moment, then pulled her closer. Sebastian lowered the binoculars, unable to watch more. The betrayal was complete now, financial and personal, intertwined in a way that made horrible sense. The late meetings, the separate cars arriving at the same destination, the elaborate schemes to move money. It wasn't just theft. It was a partnership built on deception, with his marriage as collateral damage. He raised the Polaroid camera and took 3 shots in rapid succession. The distance and darkness would make them nearly useless as evidence of the embrace, but they'd clearly show 2 figures at the bank after hours, exchanging materials. As he drove home, Scout whining softly in the passenger seat, Sebastian made a decision. Tomorrow he'd call Reagan Williams. Tomorrow he'd start the process that would bring this whole thing crashing down. But tonight, he had to go home and pretend to be asleep when Allison slipped into bed at 1 a.m., smelling of cologne that wasn't his, carrying secrets that were eating their marriage from the inside out. The infrastructure of betrayal was complete. Now it was time to start its demolition. Chapter 4. The shredder at Clearview Bank and Trust ran every night at 10 p.m. like a metallic heartbeat echoing through empty halls. Emily Lopez had cleaned around it for 3 years, knew its rhythms, its sounds when it jammed, the way the bags bulged when they were overfull. But tonight was different. Tonight, the bag had torn. She stood in the loading bay at 11:47 p.m., holding a handful of confetti that had spilled from the ripped bag like guilty secrets. The March wind whipped through the bay doors, threatening to scatter the evidence. Emily made a decision that would change everything. She pulled a clean grocery sack from her cart and carefully scooped up as much of the shredded paper as she could. Most people would have just swept it up, thrown it away. But Emily had been watching things at this bank. Strange things. Envelopes that shouldn't be there. Meetings that ran too late. And Mr. Miller, the pizza shop owner, collecting evidence like a man preparing for war. At home, in her small apartment on Maple Street, Emily spread the confetti across her kitchen table. The overhead light was harsh, fluorescent, making her eyes water as she started the tedious work of reconstruction. It was past midnight, but her shift schedule had long ago destroyed any concept of normal sleeping hours. She started with the larger pieces, looking for patterns. Most of it was genuinely random customer records, old memos, routine correspondence. But then she found something interesting. Letterhead pieces, all with the same font and logo. But something was off. Emily had a good eye for detail. You didn't last long as a night cleaner without it. The logo on these pieces, a stylized tree that was the bank's symbol, was wrong. The branches curved left instead of right. The font was Times New Roman instead of the Arial the bank had used for the past 2 years. She pulled out her phone and Googled Clearview Bank logo history. After 15 minutes of searching, she found this was the old logo, the one they'd stopped using in 2014. Yet the memo fragments were dated last week. Piece by piece, using Scotch tape and patience, Emily reconstructed a partial header. It read, Confidential Portfolio, Reallocation authorized by Board Resolution 20,160,315 inches. But March 15, 2016 was last week. Emily knew because it was her nephew's birthday, and she'd cleaned the boardroom that night. There had been no board meeting. Someone was creating false documents, backdating them, using old letterhead to make them look legitimate, and then shredding them? Why create fake documents just to destroy them? Unless they'd been copied first. Unless the shredding was just disposal after the forgeries had served their purpose. Emily looked at the clock, 2:37 a.m. She had to be back at work in 18 hours. But first, she needed to document this. She pulled out a composition notebook, the kind she'd used in night school, and started writing, describing everything she'd found, taping in the reconstructed pieces as evidence. The next morning, Sebastian stood in the courthouse annex, filling out a routine permit application for a food truck he had no intention of buying. But it gave him a reason to be there, to observe the flow of paperwork through the building's veins. Hazel Garcia worked her desk with mechanical precision, routing documents through the proper channels. Everything here had a process, a chain of custody, a paper trail that could be followed forward or backward. "Mr. Miller," Hazel said without looking up, "you might want to check your mailbox. Sometimes maintenance tickets get misrouted there." Sebastian frowned. He didn't have a mailbox here, but he played along. "I'll do that, thanks." The mailboxes were in the basement, rows of small metal doors with combination locks. Tucked behind a maintenance ticket on the bulletin board was a manila envelope with his name on it. Inside, Emily's reconstructed letterhead, along with a note. "Found this while cleaning. Thought you should see. A friend." Sebastian studied the reconstructed header, understanding immediately what it meant. Forged documents using old letterhead. Someone was creating a false paper trail. He photographed it with his flip phone, then walked back to Hazel's desk. "Hypothetically," he said quietly, "if someone found evidence of forged bank documents, what would be the proper channel to report it?" Hazel looked up, her expression carefully neutral. "Hypothetically, that would be banking fraud, federal crime. The State Banking Commission would need to be notified immediately." "And they would investigate?" "Oh, yes. They take forgery very seriously, especially if it involves falsified board resolutions." She pulled out a form from her drawer. "This is a banking irregularity report, hypothetically." Sebastian took the form. Hypothetically, would supporting evidence be needed? The more, the better. Dates, times, documents, witness statements, if available. She paused. "Hypothetically, someone in your position might want to move quickly. These kinds of schemes tend to accelerate when they feel threatened." That afternoon, Sebastian sat in his office at Elm Street Pizza, the door locked, Scout lying across the threshold like a furry security system. He'd spread out everything he'd collected over the past weeks, photos, receipts, ledgers, and now Emily's reconstructed forgery. The pattern was becoming clear. Rhett Anderson was running some kind of parallel financial system within the bank, using forged board resolutions to authorize it. Allison was involved, had to be, given her position and their relationship. The charity funds were just a small part, probably a test run or a side benefit. His phone rang. George Jackson. "Sebastian, you need to hear this. My Saturday morning radio show, I just got a call you need to hear." George ran a call-in show on WP Home, Coffee with the Captain, where locals complained about everything from potholes to politics. Sebastian rarely listened, but George sometimes played recorded segments for him. "Put it on speaker," Sebastian said. The recording was tinny but clear. A woman's voice, nervous but determined. "Captain Jackson, I won't give my name, but I work in finance. There's something happening at one of our local banks. Something about a sunset clause that was supposed to expire but never did. Board resolutions that don't match the minutes. I think someone should look into it. Can you be more specific? George's recorded voice asked. I can't. But check the board minutes from 2014. Check what changed and what was supposed to change back but didn't. And ask why some portfolio managers have signing authority they shouldn't have. The line went dead. Sebastian recognized the voice despite the attempt to disguise it. Alexandra Moore, Rhett Anderson's wife. She knew. God help them all, she knew. When did this air? Sebastian asked. 20 minutes ago. My phone's been ringing off the hook. Reagan Williams from the State Banking Commission already called. The acceleration Hazel had warned about was starting. That evening, Sebastian met Emily at a diner 2 towns over, far enough from Pine Hollow that they wouldn't be recognized. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, but there was a determination there too. I could lose my job for this, she said without preamble. You won't, I promise. You're a whistleblower now. There are protections. Protections don't pay rent. Sebastian pulled out an envelope. 3 months' salary. Call it a consulting fee for document analysis. She looked at the money, then at him. This isn't about charity fraud, is it? This is personal. It started personal, but what you found, that's bigger. That's systemic fraud. Emily nodded slowly. There's more. I went back through my phone photos. I take pictures sometimes of things that don't look right, for my own protection. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through images. Look at this. It was a photo of the bank's shredding schedule, but handwritten in the margin were notes. Special Run RA collection, destroy after copy. R.A. Rhett Anderson? Sebastian asked. Has to be. And look at the dates. They correspond with your charity events. Sebastian felt the pieces clicking together. Create false authorizations, use them to justify moving money, then destroy the evidence while keeping copies for. What? Blackmail? Insurance? Emily, would you be willing to make a formal statement? To the Banking Commission? She was quiet for a long moment then. My uncle always said you were one of the good ones. Said you came back from the war broken but not mean. That's rare. Your uncle? George Jackson. He's my mother's brother. Sebastian stared at her. George's niece. Of course. The old cop had been watching out for him through family ties he'd never mentioned. He doesn't know I'm helping you, Emily continued. But he told me once that if I ever saw something wrong, really wrong, I should do something about it, even if it cost me. It won't cost you. I'll make sure of that. She smiled sadly. You can't promise that, Mr. Miller, but I appreciate you trying. Saturday arrived with spring rain, the kind that cleaned the streets and made everything smell like earthworms and possibilities. Sebastian stood in the bank, ostensibly making a deposit, but actually watching the morning shift change. He'd timed it perfectly. At exactly 10 a.m., the new teller came on duty, Jennifer, the same one who'd stamped that first misdirected envelope weeks ago. She looked nervous, kept glancing toward the elevator. Then Sebastian saw why. Reagan Williams walked through the front door, accompanied by 2 other people in dark suits carrying briefcases. State Banking Commission. The audit was starting. Daniel Thomas, the branch manager, rushed out of his office, his face flushed. Miss Williams, we weren't expecting you until Monday. Routine inspection, Reagan said calmly. We'll need access to all records from the past 2 years. Immediately. Of course, but Mr. Anderson handles those portfolios and he's not in today. Then you'll need to call him. We'll wait. Sebastian finished his deposit and left, but not before catching Reagan's eye. She gave him the slightest nod. She'd gotten his package, the one he'd sent by registered mail yesterday, containing copies of everything he'd found. That afternoon, Pine Hollow buzzed with rumors. The bank was being audited, something about irregularities, possibly fraud. Paisley Hernandez from the Ledger was all over it, interviewing anyone who'd talk. Sebastian stayed in his pizza shop, making dough, serving customers, playing normal. But his phone buzzed constantly with updates from his network of observers. From Violet at the cafe. Rhett just tore into the bank looking panicked. From Carlos. Allison just called in sick for tonight's shift. From George. State police just pulled up to the bank. At 6 p.m., Sebastian closed early, claiming a family emergency. He drove to the overlook above town, where he could see the bank's parking lot. It was full of official vehicles. Lights blazed in every window. Through his binoculars, he could see people carrying boxes of documents. His phone rang. Emily. "They called me in," she said. "The auditors. They want to know about the shredding schedules. Tell them the truth, all of it. I'm scared. I know, but you're doing the right thing." "Mr. Miller, your wife is here. She's in Daniel's office. She's crying." Sebastian closed his eyes. Despite everything, part of him felt sympathy. But then he remembered the late nights, the lies, the casual cruelty of her deception. "Let her cry," he said. That night, alone in his house with Scout, Sebastian pulled out a fresh notebook and began writing. Not notes this time, but a narrative. The complete story of how he'd uncovered the fraud, step by step, evidence by evidence. It would be needed for the investigation, maybe for court. The phone rang at 11 p.m. Allison. "How could you?" Her voice was raw, desperate. "How could I what? Notice you were stealing? Notice you were having an affair?" Silence. Then, "You don't understand. Rhett said it was legal. The board approved it. With forged documents." "I didn't know they were forged." "But you knew you were taking charity money. You knew you were lying to me. That's different." "No, Allison, it's not. It's all part of the same thing, the same willingness to betray trust for personal gain. I'm going to lose everything. You already lost everything that mattered." He hung up. Sunday brought more rain and more revelations. The Ledger ran a special edition with the headline, "Bank Fraud Investigation Widens, Multiple Employees Questioned." Paisley had done her homework. The article detailed the charity fund diversions, the forged documents, the parallel portfolio system. No names yet that would come later, but the shape of the scandal was clear. Sebastian read it over breakfast at the Blue Heron Diner, Scout sitting patiently by his feet. The waitress, Brenda, refilled his coffee without being asked. "Heard you were the one who exposed all this," she said quietly. "Just did what anyone would do." "No, honey. Most people would have just gotten mad. You got even. Smart even." As he was leaving, she handed him a piece of paper. "That couple you were watching a few weeks back? They were here last night, separately. Both looked like their world was ending. Thanks, Brenda. Us working folks got to stick together." That afternoon, Father Martinez came to the pizza shop. He looked troubled, older somehow. "Sebastian, I need to know, was this all some elaborate revenge scheme?" Sebastian continued kneading dough, considering his answer. "Father, if someone steals from veterans, from charity, isn't stopping them a moral obligation? But your methods were entirely legal. I documented, I reported, I let the system work. You manipulated the system." "No, Father, I revealed what was already there. The manipulation was theirs." The priest was quiet for a moment. Allison came to confession. "I don't want to know. She's devastated. She's facing consequences. There's a difference." Father Martinez left without ordering pizza. Monday's dawn brought federal agents to Pine Hollow. The FBI had joined the investigation, attracted by the interstate commerce implications of the fraud. Sebastian watched from his shop window as they carried more boxes from the bank. Reagan Williams came by at lunch, ordering a slice and a Coke. "Off the record," she said. "You did good work. Thorough, methodical, legal. I had help." "Emily Lopez. Yes, we know. She's been very helpful. She'll be protected." "And my wife?" Reagan's expression was carefully neutral. "That's for the prosecutors to decide. But I'd say she should get a very good lawyer." "What about the money?" "The charity funds? We've frozen several accounts. Recovery will take time, but the veterans will get their money. With interest." After she left, Sebastian stood in his empty shop, feeling nothing. He'd expected satisfaction, maybe vindication. Instead, there was just emptiness. His marriage was over. His wife would probably go to prison. He'd won, but what had he won? Scout nudged his hand, and he looked down at those wise amber eyes. "You're right, girl. It's not over yet." Because there was still the divorce to file, still the legal untangling of 15 years, still the rebuilding of a life after betrayal. But for now, he had evidence that the system could work if you fed it the right information in the right way. He had proof that patience and documentation could triumph over deception and greed. And somewhere in Pine Hollow, Emily Lopez was getting ready for her shift, knowing she'd done the right thing despite the risk. They'd talked yesterday briefly. She'd mentioned maybe getting coffee sometime, when things calmed down. Sebastian thought he might like that. Someone who understood the importance of details, of doing the right thing even when it cost you. Someone who'd stood up when it mattered. The infrastructure of betrayal had been mapped, documented, and demolished. Now it was time to build something new. Chapter 5. The sound of Scout's barking cut through the 2 a.m. silence like a blade. Sebastian jolted awake, his body moving before his mind caught up old habits from Fallujah, where the difference between sleep and survival was measured in seconds. Scout stood rigid at the bedroom window, her golden fur bristling, a low growl rumbling beneath the barks. "What is it, girl?" Sebastian whispered, moving to the window. The streetlight at the corner of Elm flickered, casting shadows that danced across the alley behind his shop. Then he saw it, a panel van, engine idling, no lights. Someone was spreading something across the alley entrance. Sebastian grabbed the Polaroid camera from his nightstand, a ghost of instinct making him document everything now. The flash would give him away, but he needed evidence. He steadied the camera against the window frame and clicked. The instant photo whirred out, and in that brief burst of light, he caught the van's reflection in the puddle by the dumpster license plate, clear as day. The van's door slammed. Tires squealed. By the time Sebastian made it downstairs, the vehicle was gone, leaving only the acrid smell of burnt rubber and something else metal. The alley glittered with hundreds of thumbtack nails, spread like caltrops across the entire width. A carpet of tiny weapons designed to flatten tires, hurt feet, send a message. Intimidation, Sebastian muttered, Scout pressing against his leg. Someone's getting nervous. He went back inside, grabbed a jar and gloves. This was evidence now. Every nail was a breadcrumb leading back to whoever was desperate enough to try scaring him off. By 6 a.m., Carlos had arrived to find Sebastian and Scout in the alley. Carlos sweeping nails into neat piles while Sebastian labeled jars with his Sharpie. March 29, 2016, 2 a.m. alley behind Elm Street Pizza. "Boss, this is getting serious," Carlos said, not looking up from his sweeping. "Getting?" Sebastian sealed another jar with masking tape. "Carlos, it's been serious since they stole from veterans. I mean dangerous serious. This isn't about money anymore." Sebastian thought about Allison's late nights, Rhett's BMW, the federal agents carrying boxes. It never was just about money. It's about what people do when they're cornered. You should call the police. And say what? Someone dropped nails in my alley? They'd file a report and forget it. Sebastian held up a jar, watching the morning light glint off the metal. But this is a pattern. This connects to something bigger. At 9 a.m., Sebastian sat in the church office, George Jackson across from him, the jar of nails between them like an accusation. "Vandalism," George said, filling out an incident card with the careful precision of someone who'd written thousands of police reports. "Unknown vehicle, no witnesses besides you. And Scout. Courts don't take testimony from dogs, no matter how smart they are." George signed the card, stamped it with the parish date stamp. "You get the plate?" Sebastian slid the Polaroid across the desk. Even through the reflection and grain, the license number was readable. George studied it. "I'll run this informally, off the record. I don't want to involve you officially. Sebastian." George's voice carried the weight of 25 years wearing a badge. "Someone's escalating. First it's nails, then what? We document everything, we build the pattern, and when they finally cross the line that makes it official, we're ready." That evening, Sebastian sat in the VFW lounge, the familiar smell of stale beer and Old Glory surrounding him. The place was nearly empty, just a few regulars nursing drinks and war stories. Sebastian Miller? He turned to find a man in his 40s, cheap suit, expensive shoes, the contradiction of someone playing a role. "Who's asking?" "Bryson Davis, private investigator." The man slid into the opposite seat without invitation. "Your wife hired me 6 weeks ago." Sebastian's hand tightened on his beer bottle. "To do what?" "Find dirt. Prove you're unstable, violent, unfit." Bryson pulled out a manila folder, thick with papers. She gave me this her incident journal. Times you supposedly yelled, threw things, scared her. I know. Bryson opened the folder, revealing pages of handwritten entries. Look at the pen pressure identical throughout. The ink aging all the same. She wrote this in one sitting, probably last week, and backdated everything. Sebastian studied the pages, anger cold in his chest. Why are you telling me this? Because I don't like being played, and because she tried to pay me to manufacture evidence. Bryson pulled out a napkin, wrote a P.O. box number on it. This is where she wanted reports sent. Trace that, you'll find interesting connections. To Rhett Anderson? Bryson's eyebrows raised slightly. You already know more than I thought. Good. Makes this easier. He slid the napkin across. Those dates at the bottom? They correspond to your wife's smoke breaks, the ones where she's not smoking. Sebastian pocketed the napkin. What do you want for this information? Nothing. I'm keeping her retainer considerate payment for wasted time, but I'm done being part of whatever scheme she's running. Bryson stood. Word of advice? She's planning something for Saturday, the church raffle. Be ready. After Bryson left, Sebastian sat in the dim bar, processing. Allison wasn't just cheating and stealing, she was building a case against him, preparing for a war he hadn't known was coming. His phone buzzed. Emily. Can you meet? I found something else. They met at the loading dock behind the courthouse. Emily still in her cleaning uniform, looking exhausted but determined. The van from last night, she said without preamble. I've seen it before. It belongs to Secure Document Services Colton Brown's company. The one that contracts with the bank? Yes, and guess what else? Emily pulled out her phone, showed him a photo of a work order. They're scheduled for a special pickup tomorrow night, off the books, according to this. How did you... I clean their offices, too. I see things. She looked at him steadily. Mr. Miller, they're moving evidence. Whatever they're trying to hide, they're accelerating. Sebastian thought about the nails, the intimidation, Bryson's warning. Then we need to be ready for whatever comes Saturday. That night, Sebastian couldn't sleep. He stood in his garage, Scout at his feet, arranging evidence on his workbench. The jars of nails, the Polaroid of the van, copies of Bryson's folder, Emily's photos. The infrastructure of betrayal was becoming something else, the architecture of justice. At 11 p.m., he drove past the parking deck on 3rd Street. Level 3, just like his notes predicted. 2 cars, windows fogged despite the cool night. Allison's sedan and Rhett's BMW parked side by side like guilty secrets. He didn't need photos this time. He just noted the time, the place, the pattern. Tomorrow would bring the ambush Bryson warned about, but Sebastian would be ready. Because that's what you did when someone tried to destroy you. You let them think they were winning, right up until you showed them they'd already lost. Through the fogged windshields, 2 silhouettes faced forward, talking without looking at each other. The intimate distance of conspiracy, not passion. When the cars finally moved, they left within seconds of each other, turning different directions, but ending up at the same red light 2 blocks away, synchronized even in their deception. Chapter 6. Saturday morning arrived with false spring warmth, the kind that made people forget winter's threats still lurked beneath. The St. Andrew's Church Hall buzzed with preparation for the monthly raffle folding tables, donated prizes, the ancient drum that had spun winning tickets since before Sebastian was born. You sure you want to run this? Father Martinez asked, watching Sebastian test the microphone. After everything that's happening? Especially because of everything that's happening, Sebastian replied. Scout lay beneath the ticket table, alert but calm. Community service doesn't stop for personal problems. Carlos worked the pizza station they'd set up in the corner, the smell of garlic and oregano mixing with coffee and church polished. Everything normal, everything routine, except for Sebastian's hypervigilance noting exits, watching faces, waiting for whatever Allison had planned. Violet Taylor sat near the back with her notebook, supposedly researching her novel, but actually documenting everything with the precision of a court reporter. Paisley Hernandez from the Ledger had her camera ready, there to cover a feel-good community story that was about to become something else. At exactly 2 p.m., as Sebastian drew the first raffle number, the main doors opened. A man in a blazer walked down the center aisle with the purposeful stride of someone who served legal papers for a living. "Sebastian Miller?" His voice carried across the hall. "Yes. You've been served." The process server handed him a thick envelope, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Divorce petition and emergency motion." The hall went silent. 200 people watched as Sebastian stood at the microphone, envelope in hand, his wife visible now in the back doorway, positioned perfectly for everyone to see her, the wounded party seeking justice. Sebastian looked at the envelope, then at the crowd, then directly at Allison. She expected anger, maybe humiliation. Instead, he smiled. "Well," he said into the microphone, his voice steady, "looks like I'll need a lawyer. But first, we have a raffle to finish and pizzas to serve. Ticket number 47? Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. An elderly woman raised her hand, and Sebastian called her forward for her prize, a gift certificate to the local grocery, life continuing despite the ambush. "That was cold," someone whispered loud enough to carry. "Which part?" another voice replied. "Him continuing or her doing it here?" Sebastian worked through the raffle with mechanical precision, calling numbers, announcing prizes, thanking donors. Allison remained in the doorway for exactly 12 minutes. Violet timed it before retreating. The performance hadn't landed the way she'd planned. After the last prize, Sebastian grabbed the microphone one more time. "Thanks for coming out, everyone. Pizza's free today, my way of apologizing for the unexpected drama. And remember, the Veterans Fund still needs your support, whether or not my marriage does." That got genuine laughter and actual applause. People lined up for pizza, many stopping to pat Sebastian's shoulder or murmur support. The ambush had backfired spectacularly. Paisley appeared at his elbow, recorder in hand. "That was something." "That was desperate," Sebastian corrected, handing out pizza slices. "When people get desperate, they make mistakes." "Want to make a statement? About the divorce?" "Only this: I'll handle my personal matters in court, not in public. And I'll keep serving this community regardless." She nodded, making notes. The timing seems suspicious. With the bank investigation and all. "Does it?" Sebastian kept his voice neutral, but he saw her eyes sharpen. Paisley was connecting dots. After cleanup, Sebastian sat in his truck reading the divorce petition. The accusations were everything Bryson had warned about: emotional abuse, financial control, moral turpitude that made him unfit to run a business. She wanted the house, alimony, and emergency control of Elm Street Pizza, claiming he was using it for suspicious activities. George Jackson climbed into the passenger seat without asking. That was handled well. She played her hand too early. Sebastian showed him the petition. "Look at the date: it was prepared 2 days ago, but the incident journal she's citing goes back months. Hard to explain how she stayed if it was that bad. Harder to explain why she served me publicly unless she wanted witnesses to my supposed instability." Sebastian started the truck. "But I didn't give her the reaction she needed." "Emily called me," George said quietly. "That van from the other night belongs to Colton Brown. His brother Vincent is on the bank's advisory board." The pieces clicked. They're all connected. The affair, the fraud, the intimidation, it's all the same network. Which means they're all going down together if you play this right. That night, Sebastian sat in his study with Scout, preparing his response to the divorce petition. Page by page, he documented counter-evidence. The incident journal entries that claimed he was violent on dates when he had alibis: church functions, VFW meetings, documented deliveries. The financial control accusations when joint bank records showed Allison managing most accounts. His phone rang. "Emily. They're at the bank, Sunday night, and they're shredding everything." The investigation team seized documents. "These are different. Personal files, off-the-book records. Rhett's there, your wife, both Browns. They're panicking." Sebastian thought quickly. "Can you get photos?" "Too risky. But I can tell you this: they're focusing on anything dated before 2014. That's when the real fraud started." After the call, Sebastian opened his evidence folder, now thick as a phone book. Tomorrow he'd file his response to the divorce petition, but more importantly, he'd make sure Reagan Williams knew about the Sunday night shredding party. The war Allison had started with her ambush was about to expand on multiple fronts, and Sebastian had learned in Iraq that when you're outnumbered, you don't fight harder, you fight smarter. Through the bank's conference room window, shadows moved in coordination. Allison handed papers to Rhett, their fingers touching briefly as they transferred documents. Vincent Brown fed the shredder while Colton packed bags, a conspiracy made visible by their desperation to hide it. Every guilty player in one room, destroying evidence of crimes that were already documented elsewhere. Chapter 7. Monday morning hit Pine Hollow's courthouse like a hygiene disaster. The smell reached the lobby, spoiled milk mixed with something that might have been chicken salad last week, but had evolved into a biohazard. Kennedy Martin, the county procurement officer, stood in the cafeteria doorway with the health inspector, both wearing expressions of professional disgust. "Failure," the inspector said, checking boxes on his form with vindictive precision. "Refrigeration unit down, no temperature logs, expired product in service areas." He slapped a red notice on the wall. "Shut down immediately." Cody Martinez, owner of C&M Courthouse Catering, looked like he might cry. "The cooler just died yesterday." "Yesterday?" The inspector pointed at green, fuzzy growth on what used to be bread. "This is weeks of neglect." Kennedy's phone was already out, scrolling through contacts. 300 county employees needed lunch, and the judge's training session this afternoon required food service. "Mr. Martinez, you're done. Clear out your equipment by end of day." Sebastian got the call at 11:47 a.m. "Mr. Miller? Kennedy Martin from County Procurement. We have an emergency." "I heard about Cody. Can you provide lunch for 300 people in—" She checked her watch. 1 hour? Sebastian looked at Carlos, who was already pulling pizza dough from the cooler. They kept extras for exactly this kind of opportunity, though usually it was last-minute birthday parties, not county contracts. "Simple menu," Sebastian said. "Pizza by the slice, 2 choices, $3 per. We can be there in 45 minutes. You're a lifesaver." By 12:30, Elm Street Pizza had transformed the courthouse cafeteria. The smell of fresh pizza overwrote the morning's disaster. Sebastian worked the serving line while Carlos kept supplies flowing from their truck outside. "This is actually hot," one clerk marveled, used to Cody's lukewarm offerings. "And edible," added another. Kennedy watched from the corner, making notes on her clipboard. Every interaction, every satisfied customer, every on-time delivery built a case for something more permanent than emergency service. At 2 p.m., Sebastian catered the judge's training session, setting up a professional spread in the conference room. Judge Elliot Wilson, the same one who'd be handling his divorce, until the inevitable recusal, nodded approval. "This is excellent, Mr. Miller, especially given the short notice." "We aim to serve," Sebastian replied, noting the irony wasn't lost on the judge. After service, Kennedy pulled Sebastian aside. "Can you maintain this? Daily lunch service while we open formal bidding? How long?" 60 days minimum, maybe 90. Sebastian thought about his divorce, the investigation, the battles on multiple fronts. A courthouse contract would provide stable income and, more importantly, put him at the center of Pine Hollow's legal machinery every single day. "We can do it." That evening, Paisley Hernandez typed up her story in the Ledger's cramped office. "Local pizza shop saves courthouse lunch." A small piece buried on page 3, but Sebastian knew the power of accumulated public opinion. Every positive mention was armor against Allison's character assassination attempts. He sat with Emily at the diner, going over the day's events. She'd traded her cleaning uniform for jeans and a sweater, looking younger but tired. "You're building something," she said, stirring sugar into her coffee. "Besides pizza? A reputation. Allison's trying to paint you as unstable and vindictive, but every day you show up, serve food, help the community, you're proving her wrong without saying a word." "That's the idea." Sebastian watched her hands, noticed the small scar on her thumb, the way she held her cup like it might escape. "Emily, what you're doing, the risk you're taking." "Is my choice," she finished. My uncle always said the worst thing good people can do is nothing when they see bad things happening. George said that? She smiled. Actually, he said evil triumphs when good people sit on their asses, but I cleaned it up. They laughed, and for a moment the weight of everything, the divorce, the fraud, the danger, lifted slightly. After this is over, Sebastian started, then stopped. After this is over, what? Maybe we could have coffee when it's not about evidence and crimes. Emily's smile was soft, careful. I'd like that. After. Because they both knew there was no room for anything else until the infrastructure of betrayal was completely demolished. But maybe in the ruins, something better could be built. At the community theater, Allison and Rhett stood at opposite ends of the donation fishbowl, dropping folded bills in separately but simultaneously. They didn't speak, didn't acknowledge each other, but the volunteer noticed they both wrote the same fake name on their donation slips, a synchronization that went beyond coincidence, a practiced deception that had become second nature. Chapter 8. Saturday morning's VFW meeting had the energy of conspiracy. Bryson Davis sat across from Sebastian in the corner booth, manila folders spread between them like battle plans. The investigator looked different, less like someone playing a role, more like someone who'd chosen a side. Your wife's getting sloppy, Bryson said, sliding photocopies across the table. This is her incident journal, the one she gave me. Look at entry for February 3rd. Sebastian read, S through coffee mug, screaming about money. I was in Burlington that day. 3 witnesses at a vendor meeting. Exactly. And March 10th? Bryson pointed to another entry. She claims you cornered her in the garage, but I was serving pizza at the church. 100 witnesses. She fabricated everything in one sitting, probably last week. Didn't bother checking if her lies would hold up. Bryson pulled out another document. This is my engagement letter. Shows she hired me February 21st. But half these incidents supposedly happened after that date. She hired you to find evidence of things that hadn't happened yet? Or she's really bad at keeping her timeline straight when she's lying. Bryson leaned back. There's more. That P.O. box she wanted reports sent to, it's registered to Anderson Consulting, LLC. Sebastian's jaw tightened. Rhett's side business? The one that doesn't legally exist. No state registration, no tax ID, but somehow has a post office box and a bank account. The pieces were forming a picture Sebastian didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. They're not just having an affair, they're business partners. In fraud, theft, and destroying you. Bryson gathered his papers. I'm done working for her, but officially I'm still on retainer for another week. Gives me access to some interesting places. After Bryson left, Sebastian drove to the post office. The P.O. box was in the back section, the kind people used when they didn't want mail coming to their homes. He had a letter ready addressed to Anderson Consulting, return address clearly marked as Elm Street Pizza. The postal clerk, an older woman with rhinestone glasses, took the letter. This box doesn't accept commercial mail. I'll have to mark it refused. Please do, Sebastian said. And could I get a receipt for the refusal? She stamped it with the official USPS, return to sender refused mark, initialed it, dated it. Another piece of evidence that Anderson Consulting existed enough to refuse mail, but not enough to be legitimate. At the courthouse, Hazel Garcia was having her own revelations. She sat at her desk with 3 binders of board minutes, comparing logos and letterheads with a magnifying glass that made her look like a detective from an old movie. Mr. Miller, she called as Sebastian passed her office. Hypothetically, if someone wanted to know when an organization changed its official seal, where would they look? Board minutes from that year? Exactly. She showed him a page from 2014. Official seal change approved unanimously. New logo, new letterhead, new everything. Then she showed him another document. This memo is dated last month but uses the pre-2014 seal. Someone's using old templates to create new documents? Hypothetically. Hazel made notes in her precise handwriting. The kind of thing that would interest auditors. Hypothetically. That afternoon, Sebastian found himself in the WPHOM radio station, a cramped studio that smelled of burnt coffee and broken dreams. George's show was on commercial break. Listen to this, George said, queuing up a recording from that morning's show. came in during the call-in segment. Alexandra Moore's disguised voice filled the studio. "Captain Jackson, I need to tell someone about the sunset clause that never sunset." 2014, the board approved temporary signing authority for portfolio managers, supposed to expire after 1 year. Check the minutes. It never expired because someone kept filing extensions with forged signatures. "Did you report this to authorities?" George's recorded voice asked. "The authorities are already looking, but they need to know where to look. Board minutes, 2014, sunset clause. That's where it started." The recording ended. George looked at Sebastian. "Reagan Williams called me an hour later. The State Banking Commission is very interested in sunset clauses suddenly." Sebastian felt the acceleration, all the moving parts suddenly spinning faster. It's all connected. The forged documents, the stolen funds, the divorce. They're trying to destroy evidence and discredit me simultaneously. But they're panicking, and panicked people make mistakes. Sebastian finished. Like serving divorce papers in public, shredding documents under investigation, and creating evidence that contradicts itself. That evening, Paisley Hernandez worked late at the Ledger, 3 stories taking shape on her screen. The courthouse rescue, the divorce ambush, and now whispers of banking irregularities. Each story small on its own, but together painting a picture of something larger. She called Sebastian. "I need a quote about the investigation. No comment on ongoing legal matters. How about on serving veterans while under personal attack?" Sebastian considered. "The community's needs don't stop for personal problems. We'll keep serving as long as we're able. And if your wife gets control of your business, then I'll have faith in the legal system to recognize truth from fabrication." Paisley typed as he spoke, already seeing tomorrow's headline: "Local business owner maintains service despite personal siege." As night fell, Sebastian stood in his garage with all the evidence spread before him. Bryson's revelations, the refused mail receipt, Hazel's discovery, Alexandra's radio call convergence was happening. The separate threads were becoming a rope, and that rope was becoming a noose. His phone buzzed. "Reagan Williams. Federal prosecutors are now involved. Be ready to testify." Sebastian looked at Scout, who watched him with those knowing eyes. "Almost there, girl. Almost there." In the hotel parking lot, Rhett handed Allison a garment bag while she passed him a folder. They stood 2 feet apart, the space between them charged with more than just conspiracy. She checked the dry cleaning tag, he rifled through papers, and then they walked to separate entrances of the hotel. But the desk clerk would later remember they both asked for rooms on the 3rd floor, both paid cash, and both left within 5 minutes of each other the next morning. Parallel lives intersecting in secret, documented by their very attempts to hide it. Chapter 9. Monday morning arrived with federal authority. Reagan Williams stood in the Clearview Bank foyer at 8 a.m. sharp, her team flanking her like an invasion force. The senior auditor's voice carried the weight of government power as she read from an official document. By order of the State Banking Commission and Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, all records of Clearview Bank and Trust are hereby frozen. No documents may be destroyed, moved, or altered. Compliance is mandatory and immediate. Daniel Thomas, the branch manager, had gone pale. "Miss Williams, surely we can—" "You have 48 hours to produce all documents listed in this demand." She handed him a thick envelope. "Any attempt to obstruct will result in criminal charges." Sebastian watched from across the street, sitting in the cafe with his coffee. Violet Taylor worked the espresso machine, providing commentary. "Rhett Anderson just pulled up," she said without looking out the window. "Driving real fast for someone who should have known this was coming." "Fear makes people reckless," Sebastian replied. His phone buzzed. His lawyer, "Hearing at 2 p.m., Judge Wilson's courtroom." The Pine Hollow courthouse felt different when you were the subject of proceedings rather than the pizza vendor. Sebastian sat at the defendant's table, his lawyer a competent woman named Sarah Chen reviewing notes beside him. Allison entered with her mother Eleanor and a lawyer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. She'd dressed for sympathy conservative suit, minimal makeup, the image of a wronged wife, but her hands shook as she sat down. Judge Elliot Wilson entered, reviewed the papers before him, then looked up with an expression of professional discomfort. Before we proceed, I need to address a conflict. Mr. Miller has been a member of St. Andrew's congregation where I serve as deacon. We've served on committees together. He pulled out a form. I'm recusing myself from these proceedings. Allison's lawyer stood. Your Honor, that's not necessary. It's required, Judge Wilson cut him off. This case will be transferred to Red Elm County. Judge Patricia Reeves will preside. Her clerk will contact you with scheduling. But, Your Honor, Allison's voice cracked, that could delay things for weeks. Should have thought of that before filing in a jurisdiction where your husband has community ties, the judge replied dryly. Recusal entered. Court adjourned. Outside the courtroom, Eleanor Smith cornered Sebastian. You planned this. I planned nothing. Your daughter chose to file here. She's trying to protect what's hers. What's hers? Sebastian's voice stayed level, but his eyes were hard. The money she stole from veterans? The affair she's been having? Or the business she's trying to steal through false accusations? Eleanor's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Behind her, Allison tugged at her arm. Mom, let's go. This isn't over, Eleanor hissed. No, Sebastian agreed. It's just beginning. That afternoon, Kennedy Martin called Sebastian into her procurement office. The contract she pushed across the desk made his eyes widen. 60-day courthouse food service contract with option to extend. Based on 1 week of emergency service? Based on you being reliable when we needed you. Kennedy leaned back. Also, Judge Reeves's clerk called. Your hearing is Thursday. She specifically requested you maintain service during proceedings. Says it speaks to your stability and community commitment. Sebastian signed the contract. Another piece of armor against Allison's attacks. At 4 a.m. Tuesday, Reagan Williams's aide sat in an unmarked car watching the bank's rear entrance. The security camera had been malfunctioning for 3 days, convenient timing, but human eyes didn't malfunction. A panel van pulled up. Colton Brown emerged, wheeling a dolly loaded with black garbage bags. The aide took photos with a telephoto lens, capturing the license plate, the timestamp from the bank's own exterior clock, and Colton's face clearly visible. The bags went into the van. Colton drove away. The aide followed at a distance, watching him pull into a storage facility on Route 9. More photos, more evidence. When Reagan received the report at 6 a.m., she smiled grimly. Destroying documents under a federal hold. That's 5 years minimum. By noon, state police had the storage unit surrounded. The bags contained shredded documents, but technology had ways of dealing with that. The FBI's forensic team could work miracles with patience and scotch tape. Sebastian knew none of this yet. He was at Elm Street Pizza, prepping for the courthouse lunch service when George Jackson walked in. Thought you should know, George said quietly. Colton Brown was just arrested. 4. Obstruction of justice, destroying federal evidence, conspiracy. George accepted a cup of coffee from Carlos. He's already trying to make a deal, naming names. Vincent. And others. Dominoes are falling, Sebastian. That evening, Sebastian stood in his garage with Scout, looking at his evidence wall. Months of careful documentation, all leading to this week. The infrastructure of betrayal was being demolished by federal prosecutors who had resources he could only dream of. His phone rang. Emily. Did you see the news? About Colton? Yeah. There's more. Rhett Anderson just hired criminal defense lawyers, the expensive kind. Sebastian felt a cold satisfaction. Good. He'll need them. Sebastian. Emily's voice was soft. Are you okay? I mean, with everything? He thought about it. His marriage was ending. His wife had betrayed him in every possible way. Federal agents were crawling through his life. And yet, I'm better than I've been in months. The truth is finally coming out. When this is over, we'll have that coffee. I'd like that. After they hung up, Sebastian looked at Scout. Almost there, girl. Almost there. At the strip mall, Taylor Gonzalez watched Allison sign a lease application while Rhett stood 3 feet away, pretending to text. Put whatever name you want as cotenant, he said without looking up. We'll sort it later. The leasing agent made notes 2 people, 1 lease, careful not to appear together even while renting secret space. The pretense had become more important than the secret itself. Chapter 10. Wednesday morning brought Hazel Garcia's moment of triumph. She sat at her desk with Vincent Brown's forged memo spread before her, sticky flags marking every discrepancy like accusations. "Look at this," she told Reagan Williams, who'd come personally to collect the evidence. "The seal is from 2012. The signature is supposedly from March 2016. But Vincent Brown wasn't even on the board in 2012. He joined in 2014. Reagan studied the documents through Hazel's magnifying glass. He signed a document with a seal from before his tenure? Gets better. This signature? Hazel pulled out another binder. It's photocopied from the 2015 annual report. See the slight break in the B? Exact same break. He literally copied and pasted his own signature. Sloppy. Desperate, Hazel corrected. This memo authorized the portfolio management system Rhett Anderson was running. Without it, everything he did was illegal. With it, it's still illegal just with forgery added on top. Sebastian entered the records room carrying lunch orders. Even during federal investigations, people needed to eat. Turkey on wheat for Miss Garcia, Italian sub for Miss Williams. Reagan looked at him with something approaching respect. Still serving food while your world burns down? My world's not burning, it's being renovated. At the Pine Hollow Ledger, Paisley Hernandez typed furiously. 3 sources, 3 angles, 1 story coming together. The courthouse service, Sebastian maintaining stability, the divorce ambush, Allison's theatrical failure, and now the forgery, Vincent's desperate cover-up. Her editor looked over her shoulder. This is big. This is verified. Every source documented, every claim supported. Run it. Front page. The afternoon edition would hit stands at 3 p.m. By 3:15, everyone in Pine Hollow would know the whole story. At Clearview Bank, Daniel Thomas sat in the boardroom sweating through his shirt. Reagan Williams waited outside, her patience infinite and terrifying. Vincent Brown was in there trying to explain the unexplainable. Daniel's phone lit up with a text from Vincent. "Stall politely." He deleted it immediately, but not before Reagan's aide, positioned perfectly to see the screen's reflection in the window, noted the exchange. "They're panicking," the aide whispered to Reagan. "Good. Panicked people make deals." That evening, Sebastian gave Bryson Davis a tour of his evidence wall. The investigator whistled low and appreciative. "This is beautiful. Obsessive but beautiful." "Thorough," Sebastian corrected, pointing to each element. "Nails from the vandalism still in the sealed jar. Polaroids of the van, plate visible. Envelope stubs showing the missing numbers. All admissible, all with chain of custody. You know the feds have everything they need now. This isn't for them. This is for the divorce hearing. Allison's claiming I'm unstable and vindictive. This proves I'm methodical and justified." Bryson took photos of the wall. "I'll prepare an affidavit. My testimony about her fake journal plus this? She doesn't have a chance." "It's not about winning anymore," Sebastian said, looking at the evidence of months of betrayal. "It's about the truth being documented." At 9 p.m., Paisley's story went live on the Ledger's website. Within an hour, it had been shared 300 times. The headline was simple: "Local fraud investigation reveals pattern of deception." She'd been careful no unsubstantiated claims, no naming of suspects still under investigation. But the shape of the scandal was clear. A bank executive, a loan officer, forged documents, stolen charity funds. Pine Hollow might be small, but everyone could do math. Sebastian's phone rang constantly. Supporters, gossips, reporters from larger papers. He ignored them all except one. "Mr. Miller, this is Patricia Reeves. I'll be presiding over your divorce hearing tomorrow." "Yes, Your Honor." "I've reviewed the filings. Bring your evidence, all of it." "All of it?" "Every receipt, every photo, every jar of nails. This case has become about more than divorce. It's about credibility. Be prepared to establish yours." After the call, Sebastian stood in his kitchen looking at the folder that had started it all. Oddities, written in Sharpie on a manila tab. Tomorrow it would all be entered into legal record. The infrastructure of betrayal would become the architecture of justice. Scout patted over, resting her head on his knee. "One more day, girl, then we can rest." At the county fairgrounds after dark, Allison and Rhett sat on separate bleachers, their shoes touching the same bench rung. They talked without looking at each other, voices carrying in the empty space. The night watchman would later testify he saw them there, noted the strange positioning, the careful distance. Even facing legal destruction, they maintained the charade of separation, as if the pretense could save them from what was already documented. Chapter 11. Thursday morning broke cold and clear over Red Elm County. The courthouse there was newer than Pine Hollows, all glass and steel instead of brick and history. Sebastian arrived at 8 a.m. with Sarah Chen and 2 boxes of evidence. "You ready for this?" Sarah asked. "I've been ready for months." Courtroom 3 was packed. Word had spread about the hearing that would lay bare Pine Hollow's biggest scandal. Paisley Hernandez sat in the press section. Emily Lopez in the back row, having taken a personal day. George Jackson in full dress uniform, a silent statement of support. Judge Patricia Reeves entered at 9 a.m. sharp. She was younger than Judge Wilson, with eyes that missed nothing. "We're here for Miller versus Miller. Divorce proceedings with contested assets and allegations of misconduct. Mrs. Miller, you've made serious accusations against your husband. You'll present first." Allison's lawyer stood, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Your Honor, my client has documented a pattern of emotional abuse and financial control." "Documentation?" Judge Reeves interrupted. "Present it." He handed over Allison's incident journal. The judge flipped through it, frowning. "These entries are all in the same ink. My client transcribed them from memory, months of incidents, all perfectly recalled and written at once." The judge set the journal aside. "Continue." The lawyer struggled through claims that fell apart under the slightest scrutiny. Sebastian threw a coffee mug on a day he was provably in another city. He threatened her during a church service attended by 200 people. Each lie collapsed under its own weight. "Your turn, Mr. Chen," the judge said. Sarah stood. "Your Honor, we'd like to present evidence of a pattern of deception that goes far beyond this divorce." For the next 2 hours, Sebastian's evidence was entered into record. The numbered envelopes with testimony from Emily about seeing them at the bank. The return-to-sender receipt from Anderson Consulting's fake P.O. box. The Polaroid of Colton's van, linked to the intimidation attempt. The jar of nails, still sealed, chain of custody intact. "This is a man," Sarah said, "who discovered his wife's involvement in federal crimes. Instead of violence or public confrontation, he documented. Instead of revenge, he sought justice through proper channels." "Objection," Allison's lawyer said weakly. "The federal investigation isn't relevant to divorce proceedings." "It's entirely relevant," Judge Reeves replied. "It speaks to credibility and character. Continue." Then came Reagan Williams, called as a witness. "Miss Williams, what can you tell us about the investigation at Clearview Bank?" "Without compromising the ongoing investigation, I can say that we've uncovered systematic fraud involving multiple parties. Charity funds were diverted. Documents were forged. When we posted our hold order, evidence was destroyed despite federal warning." "Is Mrs. Miller a subject of this investigation?" "I can't comment on specific individuals, but you can confirm charity funds were stolen?" "Yes, veterans' charity funds specifically." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Stealing from veterans in a military town was social suicide. At noon, Judge Reeves called a recess. In the hallway, Sebastian found himself face-to-face with Allison for the first time in weeks. She looked hollow, defeated. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you have to dig into everything?" "Because you were stealing from veterans. Because you were lying to me. Because you tried to destroy me when I found out. I was trying to build something. With Rhett? With stolen money?" Sebastian shook his head. "You built a house of cards, Allison. I just documented the collapse." The afternoon session was brief. Judge Reeves had made her decision. "The evidence is overwhelming. Mr. Miller has demonstrated stability, competence, and restraint in the face of significant provocation. Mrs. Miller's accusations are unsupported and appear to be fabricated." She looked directly at Allison. "Ma'am, you're fortunate the criminal proceedings are separate from this court. My ruling is as follows. Elm Street Pizza remains solely Mr. Miller's property. The marital home will be sold, proceeds split after debts. No alimony will be awarded to either party. The divorce will be granted on grounds of irreconcilable differences, though the record will reflect the court's findings regarding credibility. Your Honor, Allison's lawyer started. We're done here. Mr. Miller, you're free to rebuild your life. Mrs. Miller, I suggest you focus on your legal defense. Court adjourned. Outside, George Jackson shook Sebastian's hand. You did it. We did it. All of us who stood up to them. Emily approached hesitantly. Congratulations. Or I'm sorry. I don't know what to say about divorces. How about it's over, Sebastian suggested. It's over, she agreed. Then softer, what now? Now I serve lunch at the courthouse. Tomorrow I make pizza. Life goes on. That's it? That's everything. In the bank archive room that evening, Allison and Rhett worked silently, boxing documents under federal supervision. They couldn't speak, the agents were watching, but Allison labeled a box, expired 20,142,016 inches, while Rhett slid it to a specific shelf. Even now, facing prison, they coordinated their movements like dance partners who'd practiced too long to stop. The agent made a note. Suspects appeared to be using predetermined system for document organization. Another charge to add to the list. Chapter 12. Friday morning arrived with paperwork. Sebastian stood at the clerk's window in Pine Hollow Courthouse, receiving the stamped divorce decree. Final, official, over. Congratulations, the clerk offered uncertainly. Thank you, Sebastian replied, folding the decree carefully. It represented an ending, but endings could be beginnings too. At noon, Kennedy Martin made it official in a different way. The courthouse cafeteria contract, not just the emergency extension, but a full year with options to renew. She handed him the signed agreement across her desk. The county commissioners voted unanimously. You've proven yourself reliable under extreme circumstances. Just doing my job. While your life was falling apart, that's more than just doing your job. Kennedy smiled. There's budget for equipment upgrades. That second oven you mentioned? Approved. Sebastian looked at the contract. Steady income, community position, a future that didn't depend on anyone's betrayal or approval. Thank you. Thank yourself. You earned this. That evening, the church hall felt different. The same metal chairs, the same coffee smell, but the weight that had pressed on Sebastian for months was gone. Emily sat across from him, a lost key between them on the table. Found this in the janitor's closet at the bank, she said. Think it's yours? He picked it up, his old house key, the one Allison had demanded back weeks ago. How did it? I may have picked it up when she threw it at you during the ambush. Emily's smile was shy. Thought you might want it back. For memories, maybe? For closure. He pocketed the key. Emily, I owe you an apology. For what? For dragging you into this. You risked your job, your reputation. I risked those things because it was right, because watching crimes happen and doing nothing would have been worse. She paused. And because I could see you were a good man in a bad situation. I'm not sure how good I am. I destroyed my marriage. Your marriage was already destroyed. You just documented it. Emily reached across the table, not quite touching his hand. Sebastian, you served pizza to the people who were gossiping about you. You maintained dignity when she tried to humiliate you. You protected veterans' money when you could have just protected yourself. That's good in my book. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Emily stood. I should go. Early shift tomorrow. Emily, wait. Sebastian pulled out the church bulletin from his pocket, the one he'd been carrying for 3 days. Written on it, dinner, no rush, no noise, S. She read it, smiled, looked up at him. When? Whenever you're ready. I'm officially divorced, technically unemployed except for the courthouse contract, and living in a house I have to sell. I'm quite a catch. Emily laughed, the first real laugh he'd heard from her. You're honest. That's rarer than you think. So, dinner? Saturday, after your lunch service. I know a place 2 towns over where nobody knows our business. It's a date. It's a beginning. 1 week later, Sebastian stood in the Blue Heron Diner waiting for Emily. She arrived 5 minutes early, wearing a dress instead of her uniform, looking nervous but determined. You came, he said. You invited me. They sat in booth 17, the same one where he'd once photographed Allison and Rhett. but that history felt distant now, like something that had happened to someone else. "So," Emily said, "tell me about Afghanistan. That's a heavy topic for a first date." "We've been through heavy things. Might as well start honest." So he told her. About the missions, the injuries, the reasons he'd come home broken but determined to build something. She listened without judgment, asking questions that showed she understood broken things could be rebuilt. "Your turn," he said. "Tell me about Guatemala." She smiled. "That's also a heavy topic. We've established we can handle heavy." So she told him about poverty and determination, about coming to America with nothing but hope, about working nights to pay for education that led to cleaning banks. "I'm not ashamed of it," she said quickly. "Why would you be? Honest work is honest work. Not everyone sees it that way. Not everyone sees a lot of things clearly." They talked until the diner closed about everything and nothing, about Scout's latest training success, about Emily's plan to return to school, about Sebastian's idea to expand the courthouse contract into catering, about futures that didn't involve betrayal or investigation or carefully documented evidence. As they left, Emily asked, "What happened to them? Allison and Rhett?" "Allison's cooperating with federal prosecutors. Probably won't serve time if she testifies. Rhett's looking at 5 to 10 years. Vincent got 2 years. Colton got 3. The bank's under new management." "And you're okay with that? Her not going to prison?" Sebastian thought about it. "She lost everything that mattered to her status, security, her self-image. That's punishment enough." "You're more forgiving than I would be." "Not forgiving, just finished. That chapter's closed." They reached their cars. The moment stretched, full of possibility. "This was nice," Emily said. "It was. Do it again?" "Tomorrow?" She laughed. "That seems fast." "We've been moving slowly for months, Emily. Maybe it's time to pick up the pace." "Maybe it is." She kissed his cheek, quick and light, then got in her car. Sebastian stood in the parking lot watching her drive away, Scout's leash in one hand, his future unwritten, but finally his own. In the bank parking lot at dusk, 2 figures moved in opposite directions. Allison handed her key card to Daniel Thomas, her final act as an employee. 50 feet away, Rhett loaded a banker's box into his car, federal monitoring ankle bracelet visible above his shoe. Alexandra Moore watched from the second-floor window, then pulled the blinds closed. The infrastructure of betrayal had collapsed entirely, leaving only the ghosts of coordination, the muscle memory of deception, and the echo of secrets that no longer mattered to anyone but the people who'd have to live with them forever.